Hey guys, tonight we step quietly into a world where your alarm clock is not a phone buzzing beside your bed, but a rooster somewhere in the gray distance, calling you into another day you didn't exactly choose, but must live anyway. You open your eyes before the sun even considers rising. The air is cool, damp, and smells faintly of wet earth and straw. There's no ceiling fan humming above you, no soft mattress cushioning your back, just a firm wooden platform layered with woven mats that have long since lost any softness they once had. You shift slightly, and your joints remind you, politely but firmly, that yesterday was not a light day, and neither will today be. You probably won't survive this lifestyle if you're used to modern comforts. And honestly, your back would file a formal complaint within the first hour. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. It's always fascinating to see how far these quiet stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit up slowly, careful not to wake the others just yet. Though, truthfully, they're already stirring. In a household like yours, somewhere in ancient China, perhaps during the Han Dynasty, around 2,000 years ago, privacy is more of a concept than a reality. Families often live together in a single-room home, built from packed earth walls and a thatched or tiled roof, depending on how fortunate you are. And you are not particularly fortunate. The faint light creeping in through the doorway outlines the shapes of your family. Your parents, your siblings, maybe even a grandparent or two, all sharing the same space. It's warm in winter, crowded in summer, and always filled with the quiet sounds of breathing, shifting, and the occasional soft snore that nobody acknowledges anymore. Outside, the world is still wrapped in mist. You step out barefoot, feeling the cool soil beneath your feet. It's soft from yesterday's irrigation, slightly sticky, clinging just enough to remind you that this land is not just where you live. It's what keeps you alive. The fields stretch out before you, layered like gentle steps across the hills, rice paddies catching the faintest reflection of the sky as it slowly lightens. This method of terraced farming, especially in southern regions, is one of the great agricultural achievements of ancient China. By carving fields into hillsides, farmers like you can control water flow and maximize limited land. It's efficient, ingenious, and absolutely exhausting to maintain. You take a deep breath, the kind that fills your chest with cool air and quiet acceptance, because there is no rushing this life. There's also no skipping it. Somewhere nearby, a neighbor coughs. Another door creaks open. The village is waking, not with noise or urgency, but with a slow, collective understanding that the day has begun. No one announces it. No one needs to. You glance at the sky, pale blue now, with streaks of soft orange bleeding through the horizon. That's your clock. It always has been. Historians still argue whether farmers like you followed strict daily schedules or simply adapted moment by moment to the natural rhythms of light and weather. But one thing is clear. The sun dictates everything. Not your mood, not your preferences, just the sun. And right now, it's telling you to move. Back inside, you reach for your clothes. Simple garments made of rough hemp fabric, scratchy, breathable, and not particularly flattering. But fashion is not exactly a priority when your main goal is surviving the next harvest. Silk exists, of course, but that's for the elite. You might see it once in your lifetime, shimmering on an official passing through like a glimpse of another universe. You tie your belt, adjust your sleeves, and step back out. No mirrors, no second thoughts, just forward. There's a quiet ritual to these early moments. You check the tools leaning against the wall, wooden handles worn smooth from years of use, iron tips slightly rusted but still reliable. The plow, the hoe, the sickle, each one a silent partner in your daily labor. In ancient China, the introduction of iron tools significantly improved farming efficiency. Compared to earlier stone or wooden implements, iron allowed deeper plowing and better soil preparation. It's one of the reasons populations grew, villages expanded, and empires strengthened. Which is great for the empire, slightly less great for your personal energy levels. You stretch your arms, feeling the tight pull in your shoulders. There's a rhythm your body has learned over time, a way of moving that conserves just enough energy to make it through the day. Not comfortably, not easily, but consistently. And consistency is everything. A soft breeze moves through the fields, carrying the scent of water and young plants. Somewhere, a bird calls. Another answers. It's peaceful in a way that modern life rarely is. No engines, no notifications, no distant sirens. Just the quiet, steady presence of nature doing its thing. Of course, nature is also the reason your life is so unpredictable. A single storm can undo months of work. A drought can turn hope into dust. Floods, pests, disease, all constant threats lurking just beyond your control. And yet, every morning, you step out here anyway, because what else can you do? There's a saying that echoes through generations of farmers. If you work hard, the land might reward you. Might. No guarantees. You walk toward the paddies, your feet finding familiar paths without needing to think. The water glistens now, reflecting the growing light. It looks calm, inviting even. But you know better. Within minutes, you'll be ankle-deep in mud, balancing, bending, planting, adjusting. It's a delicate process. Too much pressure, and you damage the seedlings. Too little, and they won't take root properly. Rice cultivation, especially in flooded paddies, requires careful timing and precision. It's labor-intensive, requiring constant attention to water levels, soil conditions, and plant spacing. But it's also incredibly productive, capable of feeding large populations when done correctly. Which is why you're out here. Every single day. You pause for just a moment at the edge of the field. Not to rest, there's no time for that yet. But to take in the view. The mist is lifting now, revealing more of the landscape. Other farmers are emerging, small figures moving through the fields like quiet shadows. You're not alone in this. And somehow, that makes it easier. Or at least, less lonely. A faint smile crosses your face. Not because the day ahead is easy, but because it's familiar. And in a world where so much is uncertain, familiarity is its own kind of comfort. You step forward, into the mud, into the work, into the life that has been handed to you without explanation or alternative. And just like that, your day begins. The mud closes gently around your feet as you take your first few steps into the field. Cool and thick, almost welcoming in a strange, reluctant way. You adjust your balance automatically, toes spreading slightly beneath the surface. Your body remembering what your mind no longer needs to think about. But before the real work begins, your stomach reminds you. Quietly at first, then a little more insistently. That you haven't eaten yet. You step back out of the paddy, wiping your feet against a patch of dry soil with limited success, and make your way toward home. The village is more awake now. Thin streams of smoke rise from low rooftops, curling into the morning air like slow, silent signals. Somewhere, someone is already cooking. Somewhere else, a child is being coaxed out of sleep with gentle persistence that will soon turn less gentle. Your house stands where it always has, modest, sturdy in its own way, and shaped by necessity rather than design. Packed earth walls, reinforced with wooden beams, a roof of thatch or simple tiles, depending on what your family could afford or salvage over the years. No bright paint, no decoration beyond the occasional charm or symbol meant to ward off bad luck. And yes, those charms are taken very seriously. Some families hang small wooden plaques or paper talismans near the entrance, inscribed with characters meant to attract good fortune or repel misfortune. Whether they actually work is debated. Historians still argue whether such practices were rooted more in spiritual belief or simply in the human need to feel some control over an uncontrollable world. Either way, you're not taking them down just to test the theory. You duck slightly as you enter, more out of habit than necessity. Inside, the air is warmer, carrying the faint smell of yesterday's fire and this morning's preparation. The central space is simple. A cooking area, a few low surfaces for eating and working, and sleeping mats that have already been rolled aside to make room for the day. There's no separation of rooms in the way you might expect. Life here overlaps, sleeping, eating, working, all in the same shared space. Privacy is a luxury reserved for people whose lives are significantly less communal. Your mother, or whoever holds that role in your household, moves with practiced efficiency near the hearth. A clay stove, fueled by wood or crop residue, glows softly as a pot simmers on top. The fire is small but steady, carefully managed to conserve fuel. Fuel, after all, doesn't gather itself. You sit on a low stool or directly on the packed earth floor, depending on what's available. A bowl is placed in front of you without ceremony. Breakfast is ready. If you're imagining a spread of options, you can gently let that thought go. What you have is a simple porridge, likely made from millet in northern regions or rice in the south. It's warm, filling, and intentionally bland. Not because anyone lacks imagination, but because ingredients are limited, and flavor is a luxury that doesn't always fit into survival. You take a bite. It's fine. Not exciting, not terrible, just consistent. And consistency, once again, is doing a lot of heavy lifting in your life. Sometimes, if fortune allows, there might be a small addition. Pickled vegetables, a bit of salted fish, or a few greens gathered from nearby fields. These small variations can feel surprisingly significant. Imagine being genuinely excited about a slightly different texture in your breakfast. That's where you are. A common historical fact is that the majority of ancient Chinese farmers lived on diets heavily centered around grains, with very little meat. Livestock, when available, were often more valuable alive than eaten, used for labor, breeding, or trade. So meat becomes an occasional event rather than a regular meal. Which means that if someone casually mentions having chicken for dinner, you pay attention, very close attention. You eat slowly, not out of leisure, but because this meal needs to last. It has to carry you through hours of labor before the next opportunity to rest. There's an unspoken understanding here. Waste nothing, rush nothing, expect little. A small joke passes through your mind. If modern food critics had to review this meal, they might call it minimalist with earthy undertones. They would not be invited back. Around you, the rest of the household eats in quiet rhythm. There's not much conversation this early. Words are saved for when they're needed. Besides, everyone already knows what the day will look like. There's no need to discuss it. It's the same as yesterday, and the day before that, and the day before that. After eating, you rinse your bowl with a bit of water, careful not to use more than necessary. Water, even when it seems abundant in the paddies, is still something to be respected, managed, and sometimes fought over. You set the bowl aside and prepare to head back out. But before you do, your eyes briefly scan the interior of your home. The walls are slightly uneven, bearing the marks of years of patching and repair. The roof has a few spots that might need attention before the next heavy rain. Everything here tells a story, not of comfort, but of persistence. Homes like yours were typically built using materials that were locally available: earth, wood, straw. This made them relatively easy to construct, but also required constant maintenance. A strong storm could damage walls. A leaking roof could turn a small problem into a much larger one very quickly. So your house is never truly finished. It's always becoming. There's also a quiet hierarchy embedded even within this small space. Elders are given the better sleeping positions, closer to warmth. Tools are stored carefully, almost respectfully. Certain objects, ancestral tablets, if your family has them, hold a significance that goes beyond their physical form. Ancestor worship is a deeply rooted tradition in ancient China, where families honor those who came before them, believing that their spirits continue to influence the living. Offerings, small rituals, and moments of remembrance are part of daily life. It's a comforting idea. Also slightly intimidating if you think about being watched while eating your very average porridge. You stand, stretching again, feeling the brief warmth from the fire fade as you move toward the door. Outside, the sun has risen higher now, casting a soft golden light across the village. The mist is almost gone, replaced by clearer outlines and sharper shadows. The day is officially underway. You take one last look inside, not out of sentimentality, but habit. A quick mental check, everything in its place, nothing forgotten, nothing urgently broken. Good enough. You step back into the open air, the sounds of the village blending into a quiet, steady hum. People moving, tools clinking, animals shifting. Life in its simplest and most demanding form. And as you walk back toward the fields, your body already preparing for the work ahead, there's a strange sense of grounding that settles in. Not happiness, exactly, not excitement, but something steady, something that says, this is your place, at least for now. You return to the fields with the taste of warm porridge still lingering faintly, already fading as your body shifts its attention toward something far more urgent. Work. Hunger will come back later. It always does. But for now, it's been quieted just enough to let you continue. The path is familiar beneath your feet, slightly uneven, worn down by years, decades, maybe centuries, of people walking this exact same route. Farmers like you, carrying tools, expectations, and the quiet understanding that the land gives only when it wants to. You step back into the paddy, and this time, there's no pause. The mud greets you again, cool and thick, rising just above your ankles. You adjust your stance, knees bending slightly, back already preparing for the long hours ahead. In your hands, you carry young rice seedlings, their thin green shoots delicate but full of potential. Planting begins. You move in a slow, steady rhythm, step, press, release. Each seedling is placed carefully into the soft earth beneath the shallow water. Too shallow, and it won't take root. Too deep, and it struggles to grow. There's a precision here that doesn't look like much from a distance, but up close, it demands your full attention. This is not mindless labor. It just feels like it after the first few hours. Rice cultivation, especially in ancient China, was one of the most labor-intensive agricultural systems in the world. Farmers often had to transplant seedlings by hand, a process that required coordination, patience, and endurance. Entire families would work together during peak planting seasons, turning the fields into quiet, moving patterns of bent backs and careful hands. You glance up briefly and see exactly that. Other farmers, spaced out across the terraces, all moving in similar rhythms. There's no talking, no shouting. Just the soft sounds of water shifting, footsteps in mud, and the occasional splash when someone missteps. Which, to be fair, happens more often than anyone admits. You continue your line, trying to keep the spacing even. It's a small detail, but it matters. Proper spacing ensures that each plant gets enough nutrients, enough light, enough room to grow. Too crowded and they compete. Too far apart and you waste valuable land. Somewhere in the back of your mind, a quiet thought surfaces. If plants had opinions, they would probably complain about their neighbors. You suppress a small smile. The sun climbs higher, and with it, the temperature begins to shift. The coolness of the morning gives way to a gentle warmth that will soon become something far less gentle. Sweat forms slowly at first, then more steadily, mixing with the water and mud until you're not entirely sure where one ends and the other begins. Your back starts to feel it. That familiar tension, a slow, creeping reminder that you've been bending, reaching, and balancing for longer than your body would prefer. You straighten for a moment, hands resting on your hips, eyes scanning the field you've already covered. It's not much, but it's something. Historians still argue whether ancient farmers like you experienced this work as purely physical hardship, or if there was a deeper sense of rhythm and purpose tied to it. Some suggest that the repetitive nature of the labor created a kind of meditative state, a connection to the land that went beyond survival. Others argue that, well, your back probably didn't care about philosophical interpretations. You lean forward again. Step, press, release. There's no rushing this. If you try to go faster, mistakes happen. Seedlings get damaged. Spacing becomes uneven, and the entire field suffers later on. So you settle into the pace your body knows best, a balance between efficiency and endurance. Time stretches here. Without clocks, without schedules, it becomes something fluid. You measure it not in minutes, but in rows completed, in the position of the sun, in the gradual shift from morning coolness to midday intensity. At some point, you lose track of how long you've been working. And that's probably for the best. A bird lands nearby, stepping lightly along the edge of the paddy. It watches you for a moment, head tilting slightly, as if evaluating your technique. You imagine it silently judging your spacing. Rude. It pecks at the water, then moves on, uninterested in your agricultural performance. You continue. The field begins to take shape behind you. Rows of young green shoots standing upright, small but organized. Each one a quiet promise of what might come months from now. It's not impressive yet, not in the way a full golden field at harvest would be. But this is where that future begins, and it's fragile. A sudden shift in weather, a pest outbreak, or even a small miscalculation in water levels could undo everything you're building here. Rice paddies require careful water management. Too much, and the plants drown. Too little, and they dry out. Irrigation systems in ancient China were remarkably advanced for their time. Canals, dikes, and simple water control methods allowed farmers to direct and maintain water flow across fields. These systems were often community efforts, requiring coordination and shared responsibility. Which means if someone upstream makes a mistake, well, let's just say village meetings can get very interesting. You reach the end of your current row and pause again. this time allowing yourself a slightly longer break. You straighten up fully, rolling your shoulders, stretching your back as much as you can without drawing too much attention to it. Because everyone's tired. No one needs a reminder. You look out across the terraces, now fully visible under the rising sun. The water reflects the sky in fragmented pieces, broken by rows of green. It's beautiful, in a quiet, understated way. Not the kind of beauty that demands attention, but the kind that settles in slowly if you let it. And maybe you do. Just for a moment. A light breeze moves across the fields, creating small ripples in the water. The air carries the scent of earth, plants, and something faintly sweet you can't quite place. It's calming, almost enough to make you forget how much work is still ahead. Almost. You take a deep breath, letting it fill your lungs, grounding you again in the present moment. There's no point thinking too far ahead. Not in this life. You focus on what's in front of you, the next row, the next step, the next small action that contributes to something much larger. Because that's how this works. Not grand gestures, not sudden changes. Just steady, repeated effort. You step forward again, back into position, hands reaching for the next bundle of seedlings. The mud shifts beneath you, the water cool against your skin, the sun warming your back. And without ceremony, without hesitation, you continue. You reach for your tools again, fingers curling naturally around the worn wooden handle as if it belongs there. Which, at this point, it does. The wood is smooth in some places, splintered in others, shaped not by design, but by years of use, repair, and quiet dependence. There's no sense of ownership in the modern way. You don't admire your tools. You don't upgrade them. You simply rely on them and hope they don't break at the worst possible moment. You step to the side of the paddy where a simple hoe rests against a low ridge of earth. Its iron blade is slightly curved, darkened by soil and time. You lift it, feeling its weight settle into your arms, familiar and honest. This tool, simple as it seems, is one of the most important things in your life. In ancient China, the widespread use of iron agricultural tools marked a turning point in farming efficiency. Iron hoes, plows, and sickles allowed farmers to work harder soil, cultivate larger areas, and increase crop yields. It's one of the quiet innovations that helped sustain entire dynasties. And here you are, holding that history in your hands. No pressure. You step along the narrow ridge between paddies, careful with your footing. One wrong step and you're not just ankle deep anymore, you're knee deep, and dignity becomes a distant memory. You position yourself at the edge of a section that needs clearing, where small weeds have begun to push through the water's surface. They're subtle, persistent, and extremely annoying. You lower the hoe and begin to work, scraping gently at first, then with more pressure as needed. The motion is repetitive. Pull, lift, adjust. Each stroke removes unwanted growth, giving your rice plants a better chance to thrive. It's not glamorous, but it matters. A lot. Weeds compete for nutrients, water, and space. Left unchecked, they can significantly reduce crop yields. So you deal with them early, consistently, and without complaint. Well, mostly without complaint. A small thought crosses your mind. If weeds had personalities, they would absolutely be the type to show up uninvited and refuse to leave. You continue scraping, the soft sound of metal against soil blending into the background rhythm of the day. Around you, other farmers are doing the same, each tending to their own section, each locked into their own quiet routine. There's a kind of unspoken coordination here. No one tells you what to do. No one needs to. You've all done this before. Many times, as the sun climbs higher, the light becomes sharper, casting clearer shadows across the fields. The warmth on your back intensifies, slowly transitioning from comfortable to something a bit more demanding. Sweat begins to gather again, tracing familiar paths down your neck and arms. You pause briefly, wiping your forehead with the back of your sleeve, leaving a faint streak of mud in the process. Fashion, once again, is not a priority. You shift your grip on the hoe, adjusting your stance to relieve some of the pressure in your lower back. This is where experience shows, not in speed, but in efficiency. Small adjustments that conserve energy, reduce strain, and allow you to keep going just a little longer, because stopping is not really an option, not yet. Historians still argue whether ancient farmers developed these techniques consciously or if they emerged naturally over generations through trial and error. Either way, your body has inherited this knowledge. It knows how to move, how to balance effort and endurance, how to survive a day that would overwhelm someone unprepared. You work your way along the ridge, clearing weeds, smoothing the soil, occasionally adjusting the small channels that control water flow between sections. These channels are simple, just shallow cuts in the earth. But they're crucial. Water is everything here. Too much, and the plants suffer. Too little, and they suffer differently. You use the edge of your tool to nudge a small clump of soil into place, redirecting a thin stream of water. It shifts immediately, flowing where you guide it, filling one section while easing off another. It's a small act, but it feels important. Irrigation management in ancient Chinese agriculture was often a communal responsibility, but individual farmers still had to maintain their own sections carefully. A single poorly managed channel could affect not just your field, but your neighbors as well. Which means, yes, passive-aggressive glances across the paddy are absolutely a thing. You straighten again, this time taking a slightly longer moment to breathe. The field around you is more active now. The quiet of early morning has given way to a steady hum of movement, tools working, water shifting, occasional voices calling out short, practical messages. Nothing loud. Nothing unnecessary, just enough to keep things moving. You glance at your hands. The skin is rough, calloused, marked by small cuts and healed-over blisters. These aren't new. They're part of you now, as much as the tools you hold. In some ways, they are your tools. A small, slightly strange detail comes to mind. Some historical records suggest that farmers occasionally used simple protective measures, like wrapping cloth around their hands or applying natural oils to reduce friction. Not always effective, but better than nothing. Still, most of the time, you just deal with it. You return to your work, moving methodically, section by section. There's a quiet satisfaction in seeing the difference, before and after. Weeds cleared, water balanced, soil smoothed. It's subtle, but it's there. Proof that your effort matters, even if no one says it out loud. The sun is higher now, the shadows shorter. The air feels heavier, the warmth more persistent. You can feel the day shifting into its next phase, the part where endurance becomes the main skill. And your tools, simple as they are, become extensions of that endurance. You lean on the hoe for just a second, letting your weight rest against it. It holds steady, reliable, unchanged by your fatigue. There's something reassuring about that. In a world where so much is uncertain, your tools remain consistent. They don't promise comfort. They don't make things easy. But they show up. Every day. Just like you. You lift the hoe again, adjusting your grip, stepping forward to the next patch of stubborn growth. The rhythm returns. Pull, lift, adjust. The sound, the movement, the quiet focus. And as the morning continues to unfold around you, you settle deeper into that rhythm, letting it carry you forward, one small action at a time. The sun is no longer gentle. It hangs above you now, steady and unavoidable, pressing its warmth down across the fields until the air itself feels heavier. What began as a quiet morning has shifted into something more demanding, something that asks not just for your effort, but for your endurance. You feel it immediately. Your shoulders tighten. Your back, already tired, begins to protest more openly. Even the mud beneath your feet seems warmer now, softer, less forgiving with each step. You move carefully, but the strain builds anyway. There's no shade out here. Not really. Maybe a distant tree along the edge of the terraces, but not where you're standing, not where the work is. So you stay, because that's what the day requires. You bend again, hands reaching for another set of seedlings, continuing the slow, deliberate rhythm you've maintained since morning. Step, press, release, step, press, release. It's almost automatic now, your body following patterns that feel older than you are. And in many ways, they are. Agricultural life in ancient China revolved entirely around the sun. There were no standardized working hours, no breaks scheduled by a clock. The light dictated when you worked, and the darkness dictated when you stopped. Simple, relentless, non-negotiable. Historians still argue whether this kind of sun-driven routine created a more natural human rhythm or simply a more exhausting one. Your back votes for the second option. You pause for a moment, lifting your head, letting your eyes adjust to the brightness. The sky is a clear, uninterrupted blue now. No clouds, no sign of relief, just more sun. You squint slightly, wiping sweat from your brow again. It's constant now, no longer forming slowly, but flowing freely, mixing with the water around you. Your clothes cling lightly to your skin, heavier than they were this morning. You take a breath, then another, not to rest, just to reset. Because stopping completely is dangerous in its own way. Once your body cools down, starting again feels twice as hard. So you keep moving, even if it's slower, even if each motion feels just a little more deliberate than before. This is where experience matters most, not in strength, but in pacing. You've learned over time how to distribute your energy across the day, when to push, when to ease back, when to take a slightly longer breath without losing momentum. It's not something anyone taught you directly. It's something your body figured out, quietly, as over years of repetition. A small splash nearby pulls your attention for a moment. Someone has slipped. Not dramatically, just enough to send 1 foot deeper into the mud than intended. There's a brief pause, a slight shift, and then they recover, continuing as if nothing happened. No one laughs, not because it isn't mildly amusing, but because everyone knows they'll be next at some point. The fields are equal in that way. They don't favor anyone. You return to your row, continuing your work. The seedlings in your hands feel lighter now, not because they've changed, but because your mind has started to drift slightly. Not away from the task, but into a quieter space where the repetition becomes almost soothing. Almost. There's a rhythm to it that settles your thoughts. The same motion, repeated again and again, and creating a kind of mental stillness. You're not thinking about yesterday, not worrying about tomorrow. Just this step, this placement, this moment. It's not peace exactly, but it's close. A faint breeze passes through again, offering a brief, almost teasing relief. It cools your skin for a second, maybe two, before fading away. You notice it more now than you did earlier? Because now, every small comfort stands out. You wonder briefly what it would be like to work in the shade all day. Then you immediately stop wondering, because that's not your life. You shift your position slightly, adjusting your stance to relieve pressure on one leg, then the other. The mud makes it difficult to stay completely still, so your body is always making small corrections, maintaining balance, and preventing strain from building too quickly in one place. It's a constant negotiation between effort and preservation. A quirky detail crosses your mind. Some ancient farmers believed that certain times of day were more favorable for planting, not just because of the sun, but because of unseen forces, cycles, or even the influence of the moon. Whether that's scientifically accurate is questionable. But if someone told you planting at a specific hour would make this easier, you'd probably at least consider it. Desperation has a way of making interesting ideas sound very convincing. You reach the end of another row and pause again, this time letting your hands rest at your sides for a moment longer than usual. Your fingers flex slightly, loosening the stiffness that's begun to settle in. You look across the field. It's changed since this morning. More rows filled, more green visible. The work is adding up, slowly but surely. It's not dramatic. There's no sudden transformation. But the difference is there if you know where to look. And you do. Because you've been part of every step. The sun continues its steady climb, though it feels like it's barely moving at all. Time stretches again, bending around the repetition, making hours feel both long and strangely compressed. You lose track of how many rows you've completed. And again, that's probably for the best. A distant voice calls out, short, practical, something about water levels or a tool. You don't catch all of it, but you understand enough. Communication here is efficient, stripped of anything unnecessary. There's no room for long conversations in the middle of this. You nod slightly, even if the message wasn't directed at you. It's a reflex, a quiet acknowledgement of shared effort, shared conditions, shared understanding. You're all in this together, whether you like it or not. You take another breath, deeper this time, letting it settle your body again. The fatigue is there now, more noticeable, more persistent. But it's not overwhelming. Not yet. Because you've learned how to carry it. Like everything else. You bend forward once more, hands moving automatically, placing another seedling into the earth. The water ripples gently around your legs, the sun warming your back, the rhythm continuing without interruption. And as the day presses on, you do the same. Not faster, not slower, just steady. The rhythm of the field begins to shift. Not because the work is finished, but because your awareness expands beyond it. The steady movements of planting and clearing continue. But now you notice the people around you more clearly. You're not just a farmer out here. You're part of something larger. A village. And that village, quiet as it may seem, is full of structure. Rules that no one writes down, but everyone understands. You straighten slightly, letting your eyes drift across the terraces. Each section of land belongs to someone, though ownership here is not always simple. In many periods of ancient China, especially under systems like the well-field system, land was divided among families with certain portions reserved for communal or state use. Which means, yes, some of what you grow doesn't actually belong to you. A comforting thought. You glance toward a neighboring field where an older farmer works at a slower pace. His movements are careful, deliberate, shaped by years of experience and, perhaps, a few more aches than he lets on. There's no impatience directed toward him. Age carries a quiet respect here. Elders are not expected to match your speed. They're expected to carry knowledge, and that knowledge matters. In village life, hierarchy isn't loud or forceful. It's woven into daily interactions. Who speaks first? Who eats first? Who makes decisions? It's subtle, but it's always there. You've grown up within it, so it feels natural, even if you've never stopped to question it. Historians still argue whether this structured social order created stability or simply reinforced limitations that were difficult to escape. Either way, you don't exactly have the option to opt out. A voice calls your name, or something close to it. Names here are often simple, practical, sometimes even reused across generations. You respond with a brief glance, a nod, and a few words exchanged across the water. Short, efficient. There's no need for long conversations when everyone already understands the context. Someone asks about water flow in your section. You gesture briefly, explaining that it's balanced for now. They nod, satisfied, and return to their own work. That's how communication works here, direct, purposeful, and then it ends. You return to your rhythm, but your thoughts linger on the people around you. This isn't just individual labor. It's collective survival. If one family struggles, it can affect others. If a section of irrigation fails, it doesn't stop neatly at a boundary. Everything connects, sometimes in helpful ways, sometimes less so. A small group further down the terrace seems to be working together more closely, likely a family unit. You can tell by the way they move, slightly more coordinated, occasionally exchanging brief words or gestures that don't need explanation. Family labor is the backbone of this life. Children, when they're old enough, begin helping in small ways, carrying tools, assisting with planting, learning through observation long before anyone formally teaches them. There's no clear moment when childhood ends and responsibility begins. It just blends. A slightly amusing thought crosses your mind. If modern kids had to switch places for a day, the complaints would start before sunrise and probably end sometime next week. You suppress another small smile. Then get back to work. The sun continues its steady presence above, and the air feels heavier now, pressing down in a way that makes every movement just a little more effortful. But something else has changed too. The quiet isolation of earlier hours has softened. There's a shared energy now. Not loud, not distracting, just present. You hear the occasional murmur, the soft splash of movement, the distant call of someone coordinating a small task. It creates a subtle background layer to your work, reminding you that you're not alone in this effort. Even if you still have to do your part, you move toward a section where the water level needs slight adjustment. Using your foot and the edge of your tool, you reshape a small ridge, allowing a thin stream to pass through. It's a delicate balance. Too much, and it floods. Too little, and it stagnates. You watch it for a moment, ensuring it settles correctly. This kind of attention to detail is expected, not praised, just expected. A more unusual detail comes to mind. Some rural communities in ancient China held small local rituals tied to agriculture, offering thanks or seeking favor from nature spirits or deities believed to influence harvests. These practices varied widely, sometimes blending official beliefs with local traditions. Whether they actually affected crop outcomes is unclear. But if someone suggested a small offering might improve your chances this season, you'd probably be open to the idea. At this point, you're not ruling anything out. You glance again at the surrounding fields. The pattern of green is becoming more defined, more consistent. The collective work of the village is visible now, not as individual effort, but as a shared transformation of the land. It's quietly impressive, even if no one stops to admire it. A brief interaction catches your attention. A younger farmer hesitates, unsure about something, and an older one steps in, offering guidance with a few simple gestures. No long explanation, no lecture. Just a correction, demonstrated once, then repeated. That's how knowledge moves here. Not through books, but through doing. You've learned the same way. Watching, trying, adjusting, repeating. And over time, those small lessons become part of you, shaping how you move, how you work, how you understand this land. You pause again, just for a moment, letting your gaze settle across the terraces one more time. The sun, the water, the people, all moving together in a quiet, coordinated rhythm that doesn't need to be organized. It just exists. And you're part of it. Not at the center, not on the edge, just within it. You take another breath, steady and grounding, then shift your grip on your tool once more. The fatigue is there, but so is the familiarity, the quiet acceptance of what this day is and what it requires from you. No surprises, no sudden changes, just the continuation of what you've already begun. You step forward again, returning fully to your work, the sounds of the village settling back into the background as your focus narrows once more. And the rhythm carries on. The rhythm of the village continues around you. But there's something else layered beneath it. Something less visible, less immediate, but just as real. The empire. You don't see it often. There are no towering palaces here, no officials walking through your fields every day, no grand displays of power. But it's there, quietly shaping your life in ways you can't ignore. You feel it in what you owe. Because this land you work isn't entirely yours. You press another seedling into the mud, fingers steady, movements practiced, but your thoughts drift briefly to the obligations that wait beyond the harvest. A portion of what you grow will not stay with your family. It will travel, collected, measured, recorded, eventually making its way into granaries that support cities, armies, and the vast machinery of the state. In many dynasties, and including the Han, farmers were required to pay taxes in grain, labor, or sometimes cloth. It wasn't optional. It wasn't negotiable. It was simply part of life. Historians still argue whether these systems were relatively fair, providing structure and stability, or if they placed a heavy burden on those already working at their limits. Standing here, ankle deep in mud, you might have a leaning. A small voice calls out from further up the terrace. Someone mentioning a visit from a local official in the coming days. It's not urgent, but it's enough to shift the atmosphere slightly. Conversations quiet a bit. Movements become just a touch more precise. No one panics, but no one ignores it either. Officials, when they do appear, represent more than just administration. They represent expectation. Records must match reality. Fields should appear orderly. Yields should be reasonable. And reasonable is a flexible concept. You adjust your stance, moving toward another section, but your awareness lingers on that idea. The balance between what you produce and what you keep is delicate. Too little, and your family struggles. Too much demanded, and the strain becomes something else entirely. Something harder to carry. You use your tool to smooth a narrow ridge, guiding water carefully between sections. The motion is familiar, grounding. It pulls your attention back to the present moment, away from the abstract weight of obligations you can't directly control. Because right now, This is what you can control. This small channel, this row, this step. There's a quiet practicality in that. You glance toward a neighbor who's working a slightly larger section of land. Maybe their family has more hands. Maybe they've been here longer. Maybe they've simply had better seasons. Differences exist here, but they're not always obvious. Still, you notice, because you have to. A faint breeze moves across the fields again, carrying with it the distant sound of something metallic, perhaps a tool being set down, or adjusted, or repaired. It's a reminder that everything here is maintained constantly, not just the land, but the systems around it. Taxation wasn't just about collecting grain. In some periods, farmers were also required to provide corvée labor, temporary service for public works like building roads, maintaining canals, or even working on defensive structures, which means that sometimes your time in the fields is interrupted, not by rest, but by a different kind of work. You imagine, briefly, leaving your village for a few weeks to dig, carry, build, under supervision, with limited say in the matter. The thought doesn't feel particularly appealing. Another small joke slips through your mind. Apparently, taking time off has always been a complicated concept. You almost smile. Almost. You continue your work, focusing again on the task in front of you. The seedlings, the soil, the water. These are tangible, immediate. They respond to your effort in ways that distant policies do not. And that matters. There's a quiet resilience in that focus. A way of keeping yourself grounded when larger forces feel too far away to influence, but too close to ignore. You reach the edge of your section and pause, resting your hands briefly on the handle of your tool. The sun is still high, though it has begun its slow, almost imperceptible descent. The light is slightly softer now, but the warmth remains. You look out across the terraces again. The village, the fields, the people, all of it existing within a system that stretches far beyond what you can see from here. It's a strange thought, that your daily work contributes, in some small way, to something vast and distant. That the grain you plant today might feed someone you'll never meet, in a place you'll never visit. There's a certain pride in that, and also a certain distance. You shift your grip again, stepping forward, returning to the rhythm. The repetition helps. It always does. It narrows your focus, keeps your thoughts from drifting too far into questions that don't have clear answers. Because those answers aren't coming. Not today. Maybe not ever. You hear another voice nearby. Someone discussing the upcoming collection, estimating yields, quietly calculating what they might have left after everything is accounted for. There's no panic in the tone, just careful consideration. That's how people here deal with uncertainty. They don't ignore it. They prepare for it. You take a slow breath, letting it settle your thoughts again. The air feels slightly cooler now, though it might just be your body adjusting. Either way, it's a small relief. You continue planting, each movement steady, deliberate, contributing to a future that is never guaranteed but always pursued. Because that's the nature of this life. You work, you provide, you give what's required, and you hope quietly, without expectation, that what remains will be enough. Enough for your family. Enough for the next season. Enough to keep going. You press another seedling into the earth, watching the water ripple outward in small circles, then settle again. And just like that, the moment passes. The thought fades, and the work continues. The sun begins its slow descent, though you only notice it because the light softens slightly, stretching the shadows just a little longer across the terraces. The heat lingers, but there's a subtle shift in the air. Something quieter. Something that signals the day is moving forward, whether you're ready or not. You pause at the edge of your row, hands resting briefly on your knees, and look out across the fields again. What was once scattered patches of effort now looks more complete. Rows of green standing in quiet formation, reflecting the hours you and everyone around you have poured into the land. But this is only the beginning, because everything you've done today is just a gamble. You straighten slowly, rolling your shoulders as your gaze drifts beyond to the immediate field, toward the hills and sky that surround your village. This land, as familiar as it feels, is never entirely predictable, and it never promises anything. Seasons define your life in ways that go far beyond comfort or preference. They determine whether your work leads to abundance or to something much harder. Rice farming depends heavily on timing. Plant too early, and cold snaps can damage the young shoots. Too late, and the growing season shortens, reducing yield. Water levels must rise and fall at the right moments. Rain must come, but not too much. It's a delicate balance, and you're not in control of most of it. Historians still argue whether ancient farmers viewed these uncertainties with resignation or with a deeper sense of faith, trusting in cycles, in patterns, in forces beyond human influence. But standing here, watching the sky, it feels less philosophical and more practical. You prepare, and you hope. A faint memory surfaces, last season, or maybe the one before. A storm that came too quickly, too heavily. Water that rose faster than expected, flooding sections of the field, washing away days of careful work. You remember the silence afterward. Not shock, not panic. Just a quiet, collective understanding that something had been lost, and that it would have to be rebuilt. You step carefully along the ridge, checking the water levels again. They seem stable for now. The channels are holding, the flow is steady. It's a small reassurance, but you take it. Because small reassurances are all you get. A bird circles overhead, its shadow passing briefly across the water below. You follow it with your eyes for a moment, then return your focus to the field. Distractions are brief here. They have to be. You crouch slightly, adjusting a cluster of seedlings that have leaned too far to one side. The movement is gentle, precise. These plants are still fragile. They need time, care, and a bit of luck. A lot of luck, actually. In ancient China, entire communities depended on the success of each harvest. A good season meant stability. Enough food, enough resources to trade, enough to meet obligations. A bad season could lead to shortages, debt, or worse. Famine was not a distant concept. It was a real possibility, and everyone knew it. You stand again, your legs slightly stiff from the constant bending. The fatigue is deeper now, settling into your muscles in a way that doesn't fade with a single stretch. But there's also a shift in your mindset. A quiet awareness that the hardest part of the day is behind you. Not because the work is done, but because you've made it this far. You glance toward the edge of the village where a few trees stand, their leaves barely moving in the soft breeze. They offer a kind of visual comfort, even from a distance. A reminder that not everything is exposed, not everything is under the open sky. A small, slightly strange thought crosses your mind. Some farmers believed that certain signs in nature could predict the outcome of a season. The behavior of animals, the pattern of clouds, even the way certain plants grew. Whether those signs were reliable is debatable. But when your survival depends on things you can't control, You start paying attention to anything that feels like a clue. You look up again, studying the sky for a moment longer than usual. It's still clear, calm, no immediate threat. For now. You exhale slowly, letting that small piece of relief settle in your chest. It doesn't guarantee anything, but it's something you can hold on to, even if only briefly. You return to your work, finishing the last section of your current row. The movements are slower now, more deliberate, as your body conserves what little energy remains. Each step is careful, each placement precise. There's no rushing the end of the day, because rushing leads to mistakes, and mistakes carry forward. You reach the final edge of the row and stop. For a moment, you simply stand there, looking at what you've completed. It's not perfect. It never is. But it's done. For today. And that has to be enough. You turn slightly, scanning the surrounding fields. Others are doing the same, finishing rows, adjusting tools, preparing to step out of the paddies. The collective rhythm is slowing, not abruptly, but gradually, like a tide easing back. The day is beginning to release its hold. You step carefully out of the mud, feeling the difference immediately. Solid ground beneath your feet again. It feels strange at first, almost unfamiliar after hours of shifting balance. You wipe your feet as best you can, though the mud clings stubbornly, refusing to leave entirely. Much like the day itself. You take one last look at the fields, the water reflecting the softening light, the rows of green standing quietly in place. They'll remain here overnight, unchanged, waiting, just like you will, waiting for the next day, the next task, the next season, because this cycle doesn't end. It just continues. And as you turn back toward the village, your body heavy but your steps steady, there's a quiet understanding that settles in. You've done what you could today. The rest is no longer in your hands. You leave the fields behind slowly, not out of reluctance, but because your body has forgotten what it feels like to move quickly on solid ground. Each step back toward the village feels slightly heavier than it should. Your legs adjusting, your balance recalibrating after hours in shifting mud. The air is cooler now, not cold, just softer. The kind of change you don't notice immediately, but your body does. Your shoulders drop a little. Your breathing steadies. The constant tension of the day loosens, just enough to remind you that this part of the day belongs to something else. Not work, something quieter. You pass by others making the same journey, tools resting on shoulders, hands hanging loosely at their sides. There's a shared understanding in these moments. No one needs to say much. You've all been through the same day, and you've all made it through, which, in itself, feels like a small victory. The village comes into clearer view as you approach. The low houses, the narrow paths, the faint smoke rising again from cooking fires being prepared for the evening meal. It's a familiar sight, one that carries a subtle sense of relief. You're back. For now. You set your tool down near the entrance of your home, leaning it carefully against the wall. Not out of habit alone, but out of respect. Tools, once again, are not easily replaced. A broken handle or a chipped blade isn't just inconvenient. It's a problem. You step inside briefly, rinsing your hands and feet with a small amount of water. The cool sensation is immediate, washing away layers of mud and sweat, though not entirely. Some of it stays, embedded in your skin, in your clothes, in the quiet evidence of the day. You don't mind. It's part of the routine. You step back outside, drawn by the subtle shift in the village atmosphere. There's more movement now, but it's different from the morning. Less focused, less urgent. People are gathering in small clusters, exchanging a few words, checking in without making it seem like checking in. This is where the day softens. You move toward a small open area near a few neighboring homes. Nothing formal, just a space where people tend to gather as the light fades. Someone is sitting on a low stool, another leaning against a post. A child tracing patterns in the dirt with a stick. The conversations are quiet, scattered. A comment about water levels. A mention of the upcoming visit from the official. A brief observation about the weather. Nothing dramatic. But it matters. Village life is built on these small interactions. Not grand speeches or long discussions, but short, consistent exchanges that maintain a sense of connection. You're not just individuals working separate fields. You're part of a network, even if it's a quiet one. A man nearby chuckles softly at something, some small joke about slipping in the mud earlier. The kind of humor that doesn't demand attention, but lingers just long enough to lighten the air. You catch the edge of it and allow yourself a faint smile. 3 jokes a day, even out here, seem to survive. Someone passes around a small bundle, maybe roasted grains, maybe a simple snack prepared from leftovers. It's not much, but it's shared. You take a small portion, nodding in thanks, and eat slowly. The taste is simple. But after a day like this, even simple feels satisfying. Food in these moments is less about nourishment and more about presence. It marks the transition from labor to rest, from individual effort to shared space. You sit for a moment, letting your body settle. The ground beneath you is firm, unmoving, a welcome contrast to the shifting instability of the paddies. Your muscles begin to relax, though the fatigue doesn't disappear. It just becomes quieter. In ancient China, villages often served as tight-knit communities where cooperation was essential. Whether managing irrigation, preparing for seasonal changes, or supporting one another during difficult times, the collective mattered. Not because it was ideal, but because it was necessary. Historians still argue whether this strong sense of community was a source of comfort or simply another layer of obligation, another expectation woven into daily life. Sitting here, it feels like a bit of both. A child runs past, chasing something only they can see, their energy untouched by the weight of the day. You watch them for a moment, a faint sense of something, nostalgia maybe, passing through your thoughts. There was a time when your days felt lighter, less structured, less demanding. But that time fades quickly, because tomorrow will come, and it will look very similar to today. A slightly unusual detail comes to mind. Some villages held small evening rituals or informal gatherings during certain times of the year where stories were shared, songs quietly sung, or simple traditions observed. Nothing elaborate, but enough to mark the passing of time in a way that felt meaningful. Whether your village does that regularly or only occasionally, it's something you're aware of and something you appreciate, even if you don't say it out loud. The sky begins to shift colors now. Soft oranges, fading into deeper shades as the sun lowers itself behind the distant hills. The light becomes gentler, casting longer shadows, wrapping the village in a calm, almost protective glow. You take a slow breath, letting it settle in your chest. This is the part of the day where everything feels quieter. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. The urgency is gone. The demands have eased. And for a short while you exist in a space where nothing is required of you beyond simply being here. You glance around once more. The familiar faces, the small movements, the quiet exchanges. It's not a grand scene. There's no spectacle. But it's enough. More than enough. You shift slightly, preparing to head back inside as the light continues to fade. The evening meal will come next, simple as always, followed by rest that never quite feels long enough. But for now, you stay just a moment longer, letting the quiet settle, letting the day end, not abruptly, but gently, exactly as it should. You rise slowly from where you've been sitting, your body reminding you, once again, that today was not light work. The ground feels steady beneath your feet, but your legs carry a quiet heaviness, the kind that doesn't go away with a single stretch or a deep breath. It stays, but it softens. The sky has shifted fully now, the last traces of orange fading into deeper blues. A few early stars begin to appear, faint at first, then more certain as the light continues to dim. The village moves with this transition, almost instinctively. Conversations quiet, movement slow. The day folds itself away. You step back inside your home, ducking slightly out of habit. The interior is dimly lit now, the soft glow of a small oil lamp or fire casting gentle shadows against the walls. It's warm, not in an overwhelming way, but enough to feel sheltered from the open air outside. The space hasn't changed since this morning, but it feels different, because you've changed. You settle down onto the familiar mat, your body lowering carefully, as if negotiating with every muscle along the way. There's a quiet relief in this moment. Nothing dramatic, no sudden release, but a steady easing of tension that spreads gradually from your shoulders down to your legs. This is rest. Simple, earned. Nearby, the evening meal is prepared with the same quiet efficiency as breakfast. Another bowl, another simple dish. Grain, perhaps a few vegetables. Maybe something slightly different if the day has been kind. You eat slowly, not out of necessity this time, but because there's no reason to rush. The urgency of the day is gone. What remains is stillness. A historical detail lingers in the background of this moment. Meals like this, shared within the household, were often one of the few times families gathered without the immediate pressure of labor. It wasn't leisure in the modern sense, but it was a pause, and pauses matter. You finish eating, setting your bowl aside with a quiet motion. No clatter, no excess. Just the small, familiar sounds of routine. Someone adjusts the fire. Someone shifts their position. Someone exhales a little more deeply than before. These are the sounds of a day ending. You lean back slightly, your eyes drifting toward the ceiling, or what passes for one. The beams above you, the texture of the roof, the faint movement of shadows as the light flickers. It's all simple, all known. Nothing here surprises you. And that, in its own way, is comforting. A slightly unusual thought crosses your mind. Some people in ancient China believed that dreams carried meaning, messages from ancestors or signs of what was to come. Whether that's true is uncertain. But after a day like this, you suspect your dreams will be less about prophecy and more about finding a place to sit down that doesn't involve mud. You almost smile again. Almost. You shift onto your side, adjusting the thin layers beneath you, finding a position that feels acceptable. Not perfect, not particularly comfortable, but good enough. Good enough is a recurring theme in your life. Historians still argue whether people living in conditions like this experience contentment in a way that modern perspectives struggle to understand, or if they simply adapted to what was available, redefining comfort based on necessity. Lying here now, it feels less like a question that needs answering, and more like a reality that simply exists. Outside, the sounds of the village fade further. A distant voice, softer now. The faint movement of someone closing a door. The quiet settling of a world that has done enough for one day. Your breathing slows, your body sinks more fully into the surface beneath you, and your thoughts begin to loosen their hold. You think briefly of the fields, the rows you planted, the water you adjusted, the work you completed. It's still there, waiting. It will be there tomorrow, just as you will. The cycle continues. But right now, it pauses. And in that pause, there is something gentle, something that doesn't demand effort, something that allows you to simply drift. Your eyes grow heavier, the edges of the room softening, the details blending into shadow. The lamp flickers once more, then steadies, casting a final quiet glow. And as the night deepens, your awareness begins to fade with it. The day is done, and for a little while, that is enough. The air around you feels still, calm, almost suspended in time. Your body, once tense with effort, now rests fully, each muscle slowly releasing what it no longer needs to hold. The sounds of the village have faded into a distant quiet, replaced by the soft rhythm of your own breathing. In this moment, there is nothing to do, nothing to carry, nothing to solve. The fields can wait. The sun has set, and with it, the expectations of the day have gently loosened their grip. Tomorrow will come, as it always does, but it has not arrived yet. And that space between is yours. You feel the weight of the day settle into the ground beneath you, as if the earth itself is taking it back, piece by piece. The steady work, the quiet effort, the small thoughts that pass through your mind. They begin to dissolve, leaving behind only a soft stillness. Your breathing slows further, even, calm, unhurried. The kind of rhythm that doesn't ask for attention. The kind that simply exists. If any thoughts remain, they drift gently, like the last light of evening fading beyond the hills. Nothing sharp, nothing urgent, just quiet impressions, soft and distant. And as you lie there, wrapped in the simple shelter of your home, the world beyond fades just a little more. The village rests, the land rests, and now, so do you.